All right, good morning. I do have to be honest with you. I expected me and about I don't know, 5 people. So it's pretty cool. Thank you for coming. I'll try and, yeah, I will do my best to try to bring this topic to life. But it's a fairly easy topic to kind of talk about and to share and to get excited about because really what you're talking about is revival taking place in a context that you and I are very familiar with. So I think that's pretty interesting. Before I pray and before I get into the kind of slides of this, I did want to share just one idea with you that I think is important to understanding what's taking place in the Great Awakening. I have a group of maybe 15 to 20 guys that I hang out with on a fairly regular basis. And they're all in their 20s and really early 30s. And not one of them is a Christian at all. Like, no Christianity at all. And they're actually super against Christianity. And we don't talk about it a whole lot, but sometimes it comes up. And one of the things that I've realized, and I've always kind of known this, but I've not been able to see it and really confirm what I know. And that is that they all really think that they have Christianity kind of figured out. And they don't have the slightest idea of what we believe. And that's kind of eye-opening to me, that you have a group of individuals who thinks that they know clearly what Christianity is and have therefore looked at it, analyzed it, and rejected it. But when you hear their idea of what Christianity is, it does not represent Christianity at all. It's like this crazy image that they've created of Christianity based on, I don't know, news, crazy churches making the news, and that has become and formed the identity of what Christianity is. Now, I'm sharing that with you because I think that it has a lot to do with the Great Awakening. So when we go through it, I'll be able to show you different points where I think that this is relevant. So first of all, the Great Awakening is going to span about 20 years, and you're looking at 1720 to 1740. And the quote that I'm giving you is from George Whitefield up there, and that is how he ended his sermons on most times that he preached. That was his kind of ending famous tagline, which is, "Come poor, lost, undone sinner, come just as you are to Christ." Now, you may hear that and you may think, that sounds very special. It is pretty special. It is kind of laying the foundation for something that was not before. So, for example, the church did not want your poor, they did not want your lost, and they did not want your undone sinners. And so for him to proclaim this, "Come just as you are," what does that mean? It means something pretty significant. Now, he could do this and he could say this because of his circumstances, which we'll get into. But it means come with the clothes that you're wearing. Come without a shower. Come just as you are. It doesn't matter. And all of that is really, really important. And all of that was very much against where the church was moving towards and what the church was at the time. So that's just the opening slide. Let me bring you into the introduction to this. Let me pray first, and then I'll bring you into the introduction. Lord, we ask that you would be with us this morning, that you would fill our hearts as well as our minds, that we would be encouraged by what you have done through these individuals at this time, Lord. And may we see it in our time. In your name, amen. All right, so in order to understand the Great Awakening, you really have to go back to the Reformation. And anything that you're studying that happened after the Reformation, you're almost always going to have to go back to the Reformation. Because the Reformation is this grand event that changes everything. From the moment it happens, nothing is the same as it was, and everything is different. So, in relation to the Great Awakening, the main thing that changed is you remove the idea of the one true church. There was always the idea that there is a one true church, and if you are in, then you're in that one true church, and if you're not, you're in big trouble. You better get your fire extinguisher ready. Because if you got removed from the church during the time of the Reformation, there's no, okay, well, I'm just going to go to the church down the road. There is no church down the road. That is the one true church. You got removed from church as a whole. You no longer can go to church. So getting rid of the idea of the one true church, once the Reformation happens, you still have your Roman churches, but now you have Lutheran churches, and now you have Baptist churches and Methodist churches and Anglican churches. Do you see the significance of this? This is huge. This changes everything. So now there's denominationalism. Now, I know in your normal everyday conversations, the denominationalism is evil. Is it? I don't actually think that it is. I think that it's a beautiful representation of what the church is. Let's just say that there's no Anglican church. There's no Protestant church that values the Lord's Supper and liturgy. Now you're all Presbyterians. You like that? What if I went into a Presbyterian church and I said, hey, guess what? You're all Anglicans. Now you care immensely about liturgy and the Lord's Supper and the sermon. Who cares? Now the Presbyterians are like, we don't like that. There are different churches for different types of people. There are different churches for different types of people to experience God in different ways. We're not better than Presbyterians. They're not better than us. We're not better than the Lutherans. We're not better than the Methodists. Maybe the Methodists. But the rest of them, there are lots of different expressions of Christianity and what that looks like, and I think that that's really, really valuable. So what you have is the one true church is gone. What happens when there's a void of leadership is that generally something else is going to fill that. The one true church, the Roman Empire, led the church. Once that's no longer a thing, what is that thing that comes in and says, don't worry, we got you? Any ideas? Nope. No. Kinda. You're kinda close. Nope. The government. Don't worry, we got you. So the government comes in and says, The government comes in and says, we will take care of you. Okay, we got you. We will be the thing that kind of organizes this and goes with it. Okay, we're going to make sure that everything is as it's supposed to be. So what you have is you have a marriage between the church and the government. There's an overlap. Remember, this is what the founding fathers are running away from. And so you've got this overlap with the government. If you still go to England today, what you're going to see is the church is tied to the state, to the government. And so in the void of leadership, the one true church is replaced with the helpful government. So you've got that. And that is how church is generally functioning. Now, there are positives and negatives to this. So on the positive side, the government gave support to the church. Support in financial support, but also in support of what the church was doing. They tried to funnel and to use the church for the government's purposes. So how can the church aid the government? How can we work with the church? And so the church always had some sort of security because they were tied to the government. And you can particularly take this and apply this to our Anglican context. And what you have is a church that is very much tied to the government. But there are also negatives to this. And some of the negatives to this is that when the church is tied to the government, the church generally swings in one of two extreme positions. So either the government and the church as a whole become repressive. You have to do this, you have to do this, and you have to do this, and if you don't do these things, then you're out. Or the church becomes so relaxed that it doesn't really care about anything. And that's what you've had particularly in England. You've had regions where the church is very much repressive. You've got to do all these things. And you have other regions where the church was super relaxed. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want to do. And neither of those are good places to be in. So what you have is when you have the colonies being formed, church in the colonies for the first time is free of the one true church as well as the helpful government. So for the first time, they don't have either of these things. And these were the things that gave them parameters. This is how you do this. And if you don't do it this way, then you're in trouble. So now you have these churches coming up in the colonies that don't have any of that. And what it does is it enables them to have a certain level of freedom in theology and practice. They can kind of do whatever they want, which is kind of scary given the history of the church, but also very freeing. And so they're no longer tied to these things. They're just starting up churches and doing the best that they can. And so what it does is it creates this a little bit of fear because there's no funding and no big brother is going to come and help you. You are on your own. So, I went to the diocese when we started doing this building plan and said, is there any funding for this? Nope. You are on your own. Now, if you go to churches that are tied to the one true church or the government, oftentimes you will find funding for it. That funding comes from those outside sources. So I think when the Roman Catholic churches build new churches, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's 50% funded by the Roman church as a whole. Any Roman Catholics out here confirm, deny? I believe that there is some funding for this from the larger church. In the Episcopal Church, it's not like that at all. You're on your own. Now, being on your own is freeing. It's also terrifying, isn't it? Like for the first time, they're on their own. Now, what it does is it creates the birth of volunteerism. And volunteerism works two ways. The first way that it works is churches were compelled to maintain their mission of preaching and teaching all by themselves. There's nobody coming down saying you have to do this. But second of all, there is freedom of the people to reject or accept the message. No longer are there benefits tied to being a part of the church. That's all gone. Britt.
What about the Church of England, especially in the South, where the Church of England, the Anglican Church, was very big? Was it not still tied to the Church of England?
Well, yeah, sure. It's tied to the people that we're at war with. Right. Sure, that we're running from. There's not a whole lot. So I think most people think that when we started the Episcopal Church in North America, that it's this very organized structural system in which we're communicating with England, and they're sending people over and they're baptizing, or they're ordaining our bishops in this orderly manner, and we're spreading them throughout the colonies. It wasn't like that at all. We came over here and we're like, hey, we're English, and so we're going to start these English-looking churches, and we need to find some way to get bishops over here. So how do we do that? Well, what they ended up doing was actually going through Scotland, and you end up having, and that's why our prayer book looks different from them, because we actually used the Scottish prayer book to bring over our prayer book. And so it wasn't organized and structured because they weren't particularly, it wasn't in their best interest to help us. And it wasn't in our best interest to go back to them for help. And so it's this crazy, chaotic system that is trying to take root. Yes, if you're going to be a part of the Anglican Communion, the larger Anglican Communion, you need to be in right standing, particularly with England. But, you know, in times of conflict, those things kind of get thrown out the window, and you pick them up later on. So when they're in the colonies, though, there's nothing that's going to kind of save them. England isn't going to save them, and doesn't really care what they're doing. So once you move from there, you have an opportunity sitting before you, because the true church owning your soul and the helpful government are gone, and there's nothing forcing conversion to take place. Could the church actually survive? Could the church, all by itself, without the government saying we can help you, without the one true church saying we got you, all on its own, can the church survive? And conversion is going to need to actually come from the heart. There's no state or colony benefits for you being a part of the church. So they're trying to figure out all of this. Brewing under the surface, though, is this reality that the laity, under the two extremes that they were under for a long time, repression or relaxation, had lost God. And essentially, there's an acknowledgement that they do not know or understand the Christian faith or the Bible. And that's significant. What you've got is you've got your farmer out there who is trying his best to go to church and figure the church thing out. And he's coming to the realization that he has relied on the larger church and religion for far too long, and he actually cannot of his own articulate the gospel. He does not know the Bible. He knows how to go to church, but he doesn't know the Bible. He doesn't know Christianity. He can't pass down to his children the faith. He can't teach them about Jesus because he doesn't know. And there's a realization that he doesn't know. And I think that that's really important in the Great Awakening, because it takes this idea of not only do I not know, but I know that I don't know. I know that I need to know more. And that's where you found the people in the colonies, is there's a realization that we don't get it. And they didn't have to. Because when they were under the one true church, the one true church cared about two things. What did they care about? Money? Money? Okay, 3. Money, power, and attendance. You come to church, we tell you what to believe, we tell you what to do, we don't care if you understand the whys, you do all these things, you send us your money, and that will give us more and more power. That's what the one true church cares about. What does the helpful government care about? Pretty much the same thing, except you can add to it, become good, law-abiding citizens. We believe that the church is helpful in creating good, law-abiding, helpful citizens. And because the church produces this, we're behind you. But we really don't care about the gospel of Jesus Christ at all. All that we care is that you put some morals in these people. So for all of those times, they've never learned about the Bible. They've never learned about Jesus. They've never learned any of this. And there's a realization that we don't know any of our actual faith, which is why I shared the opening story with you about those group of individuals that I know, because they think that they understand Christianity. And I would love for our culture to get to a point of realizing that we do not understand the faith. Because that's the fertile ground that the Great Awakening is birthed on. If you think you know, then what's the point? There's no point in reading the Bible, studying the Bible, attending church. There's no point in attending things like this, because you know everything. But if there's a realization that I don't know, that I need to know more, what that does is it creates a desire in your heart to learn more. And so this is the fertile ground of the Great Awakening. Now, the Great Awakening is going to take place in a series of regional breezes, which is just regional areas are going to pop up with an awakening, which is going to produce a larger effect later on. So the first is going to, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this guy's name, and my name is bad. But I don't know what that guy's name is, but Theodore, we're just going to call him Theodore. We're going with Theodore. He is a New Jersey pastor, and he comes in to the colony of New Jersey. He's brand new, and he's really kind of lost as a pastor. He's frustrated with his congregation, and he is going to emphasize one thing: personal conversion. That's what he's going to emphasize. Now, anytime you are emphasizing personal conversion, you are generally throwing away something. What is being thrown away when you're emphasizing personal conversion? Yes, but there's a word for that. Let's call it religion. When you are emphasizing personal conversion, you are throwing away religion. And we'll get into this more. We'll get into it a lot because this is the heartbeat of the Great Awakening. Throw away religion. Get as far away from religion as you possibly can because it will distort and destroy your soul. And so he is emphasizing, get rid of all this religious stuff. Tell me about the time that you met Jesus Christ. Carol?
Your original slide up here, the very first one, the quote from the gentleman, the prepositional phrase at the end of that quote is very important because it said to Christ, not
Yes.
to church.
Yep.
Come as you are to Christ.
All of this is going to be emphasizing personal conversion and Jesus Christ at the cost of de-emphasizing church and religion. And that is, and I'm going to show you this over and over and over again. This is the first sign that something is taking place because this church is going to explode. This church is going to double, triple, quadruple in size and excitement in months because this guy is coming in and emphasizing the person and work of Jesus Christ. Tell me about what Jesus is doing in your life. I don't care about religion. And so people start taking note of this guy. This guy's not going to show up in any other area of church history except this. This is the thing. So this guy's not important really in any sense except he was the first one to come into the colonies and say, get rid of all this garbage. Let's talk about Jesus. Tell me about Jesus in your life. And it changes everything. But that's just in New Jersey, and it's just one church. And people are hearing about it. They're trying to figure out what's taking place there. They can't figure it out, but it's one church. So from there, you have, which is probably one of the most interesting components of this, you have William Tennant, who starts a school in Pennsylvania for the ministry, it's a school for ministry, and it's a rejection of formal seminary education. And it's called the Log College, and the reason it's called the Log College is because it's a log cabin. They meet in a log cabin. And he gathers all of these outcasts that nobody wanted. And he trains them to be ministers for the gospel. Does this sound familiar? What in history does this go back to? Jesus. He gathers up a group of 12 people that nobody wanted. He pours into them, trains them for ministry, and then he sends them loose. This guy does the same thing. He says, we're not doing this formal education anymore. We're not sending them to seminary. We are going to train them right here, and then we're just going to set them loose in the colonies. We are going to send them out to every colony that we can possibly find. And what do you think their emphasis is? It's not on religion. It is on Jesus. Tell me what Jesus is doing in your life. Go out and talk to people about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Build churches on that foundation, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then we'll go from there. So he starts this school and he just shoots them out. By the way, today, this school is Princeton.
It's changed.
What's that? It's changed. Yeah. Sadly, Princeton has gone back to its former roots. Princeton is a Presbyterian seminary. It's more than just a Presbyterian seminary, but they have a Presbyterian seminary that filters in Presbyterian clergy. But this is the very beginning of that school. But when this starts, this is radical. Because what you're doing is you're getting rid of the idea that you've got to go to these higher learning institutions, otherwise you're nobody. And who are the higher learning institutions that they're pushing back against? And you know both of them. Nope. Bigger. Where are they coming from? Oxford and Cambridge. It mattered where you went to school. It mattered where you went to school immensely. If you went to Oxford, you were this kind of person. If you went to Cambridge, you were this kind of person. If you went to neither of them, you were basically nobody. And it mattered immensely. They are raising up clergy, and they're sending them out, and they're saying, we don't care, Oxford, Cambridge, we don't care about any of this garbage. We are going to raise up ministers, not academic theologians, not people who are going to sit in their little groups and talk about infralapsarianism versus supralapsarianism. They don't care about any of that. They're focused on ministry. So you've got this taking place, and they shoot them out everywhere, all over the colonies. And they're having an effect everywhere they go. They sent them as ministers in the South, these uneducated but zealous preachers primarily began multiplying in Virginia and the Carolinas, but they're going a variety of different places. And then you have in New England. Now you need a certain kind of individual in New England to pull this off. Because New England is dominated with what kind of people at this time? What's that? What kind of colonists generally settled in New England? The Puritans. And the Puritans did something interesting, didn't they? They ran away from religion tied to the state, and they tied it to the state. They started their own groups in there, and they tied their religion to their state. And so what you have, by the way, the other ones didn't do this. It's pretty much just in New England where they did this. You have an individual named Jonathan Edwards. And Jonathan Edwards is largely considered one of the top 2 American theologians ever to exist. And Jonathan Edwards is a pastor in a church up there. And when Jonathan Edwards preaches, he was considered one of the greatest preachers ever. But when he preaches, he's nearsighted. So he holds on to his pulpit like this, like he's going to tear it off. And he sits there like this. And he reads his sermon word for word. But he wrote incredible sermons. And he's just monotone. So he holds on, reads it real close, monotone reading of it, and he transforms lives. Because the words that he's reading are so powerful. Now, would this fly today? No. But it did during that time. But Jonathan Edwards is a pastor of a church that he inherits from his father. His father is the pastor of the church. And then when his father retires, Jonathan takes the church. And Jonathan Edwards walks into the church and he says he's greeted by 200 families who suffer an extraordinary dullness in religion, which I absolutely love. Because I think, it's just my view, that what religion produces by nature is a dullness of faith. And so he is determined to enliven that congregation, and he does. So it's a congregation of 200 families, which spreads to all Northampton, then to Massachusetts as a whole, and it starts moving throughout all of England. These things are happening simultaneously. The church in New Jersey begins to explode. The Log College is raising up all of these what would be considered uneducated ministers, sending them out everywhere. Jonathan Edwards is exploding up in New England area. All of this is taking place at the same time, but there are still large areas that are not affected by the awakening taking place, and that's all going to change very soon, because you have a guy over in England who is starting fires all over the place. And I've got to go through this pretty quickly, but you've got a guy over there named George Whitefield, and George Whitefield is a member of the Holy Club, and he is one of John Wesley's companions. Now, you might think the Holy Club is funny. They did not name themselves the Holy Club. They were named that by the Anglican Church, who was mocking them because they cared about Jesus instead of religion. And John Wesley was denied a pulpit in the Anglican Church because of it. So was George Whitefield. Both of them were not given a church once they graduated. So what did they do? I'll tell you what I did. I looked for a job for about a year, and nobody would interview me. I refused to submit any applications to Florida because this was the last state that I wanted to be. Now, I can tell you that I sent applications to Alaska. I sent them everywhere. No diocese would interview me. My last resort was Florida. Since being here, my kids were just asking me, like, where would you go from here? I never want to leave. Like, I'm never leaving. I absolutely love it. But on my nightstand was the Pittsburgh police application. That's what I was going to do when nobody had any interest in me. What did John Wesley and what did George Whitefield do when nobody had any interest in them? They did not. They did not want to start their own church. They pleaded to not start their own church. And until John Wesley died, he died an Anglican priest. The Methodist Church did not exist. But he did do basically church outside of church. This is the very beginning of your traveling preachers. This is the very beginning of the guy setting up a big giant box, climbing on top of it, and open air preaching. What George Whitefield did was he said, fine, you're not going to give me a church. I'm going to go out to the people, and I'm going to preach the gospel to the people. And that's what he did. And he gathered, these large crowds would gather around him. Just kind of interesting, George Whitefield was super short. He had a lazy eye and a booming voice. And so he could stand on these things, and he looked as weird as could be. I'll show you a couple pictures of him. But he had a voice that didn't match what he looked like. And it drew people to him. And so you have the very beginning of open air preaching taking place. That there's a image of that. And he just went out, and I already shared all this with you, and the people came and accepted Jesus Christ, like over and over and over again. And to the point that the church, emphasizing religion, is sitting there looking at what John Wesley is doing, what George Whitefield is doing, and they're wondering, what in the world are we doing wrong? Because these guys gathered up all these people. Now, the reason George Whitefield is important is because George Whitefield is going to come to the colonies in 1739. So in 1739, George Whitefield is going to come to the colonies, and he is going to preach his way from Georgia all the way to New York. And people dropped everything to hear him. They had heard all of the stories of his preaching. And George Whitefield was nothing like Jonathan Edwards. He was boisterous. He was emotional. He stirred people's hearts. And so George Whitefield preached from Georgia all the way to New York, and people dropped everything. There are stories, historic stories of people out doing their farming, leaving their farm equipment in the field, running through the fields because they heard that George Whitefield was in their area. There are stories of women forcing their husbands to go and listen to this guy. Begrudgingly, they show up and their lives are transformed all the way up the colonies. So George Whitefield is going to inspire the masses, even skeptic Benjamin Franklin. And this is recorded by Benjamin Franklin, not George Whitefield. But Benjamin Franklin was very skeptical. He had heard all the stories of George Whitefield from over in England. And he went to hear him preach. And he was absolutely stunned by it. In fact, he walked and measured his distance from George Whitefield as far as he could go, and he could still hear audibly everything that he was saying from his shop. I can't remember the number that he estimated, but he estimated that 3,000 or something like that, people could gather and hear every word that he said in the open air. So Benjamin Franklin is praising him, but not with religion, with the gospel. That's the emphasis. We are not emphasizing religion. I don't even care if you go to church. What I care is that you know Jesus Christ. That is what I care about. And in addition to that, not emphasizing the denomination. Not emphasizing, oh, well, we're this and we're this, so because we're this, you have to believe these certain things. No, he preached about the gospel of Jesus, which transcends all the denominations. Not with intellectual concepts, with do you know Jesus? This is what I want to communicate to the people. Not with poetic sermons or doctrinal treatises, but sermons from the heart. He didn't even write them down. He just got up there and preached. He just got up there from his heart, just gave the message. Over and over again, it's a radical departure from what had been, and honestly, what had made church and religion so lifeless. So all of these people are hearing this. So it's no longer just these regional outbreaks. It's all the way from Georgia, all the way up to New York. Then George Whitefield is going to go into New England. He's going to go into New England in 1740, and because he did this whole tour, because everybody knows who he is now welcomed into churches. Pastors are calling him, priests are calling him, and they're saying, come preach to my people. And so now he's going into the churches, and he is preaching to the church people. He's transforming the religious people and giving them Jesus at the invitation of the pastor or the priest. And although George Whitefield left a month later, the Great Awakening is already in full swing. This is taking place across the colonies. And New England is the hardest place for this to take place because of the Puritans and its connection to the individual states where it is. Once Whitefield leaves, Jonathan Edwards picks up and he goes on his own tour of preaching throughout churches with the same basic message but without the excitement. because Jonathan Edwards was, if you heard him preach today, you would say that that guy is dreadfully boring. But if you would read the sermon, you would say that it's absolutely magnificent. So the Great Awakenings throughout all the colonies, people are meeting Jesus, but not everyone's happy. Who would not be happy that everybody is meeting Jesus? The government's fine, but in the colonies, who is going to have real problems with this? Yeah, people who love religion. So all the people, by the way, does this remind you of anything? This is a picture of the Pharisees. When Jesus comes, what does Jesus do? He gives them the gospel. He gives them himself. He gives them God. He says, you don't need all this religion garbage. And who does he anger? People who love religion. It's the same thing in the colonies. So what you're going to have is you're going to have all these church splits. So there are bad things about the Great Awakening. And part of it is you have people who love religion, who are fighting for their religion. And they're looking at all this new stuff that's going on and all these crazy people that are trying to come into the church. And they're saying, we don't need these kind of people. We need like upstanding citizens. We need people who look the part. We need wealthy people. And so you have two groups invading into the church, and what they're trying to do is to reclaim religion in the church. So you have all these church splits. All these splits are taking place because this new interest in the person and work of Jesus has taken root in the churches. So, to summarize, which I know I should be like 5 minutes late, which is not too bad. People didn't know the faith, and they knew it. And this is something that is of great importance. They knew that they didn't know what they should know. And as a result, they were open to hear people preach. They were open to be taught. They were open to learn because they didn't think they knew everything. And that's really, really important. The second thing that's really, really important is you've got this band of misfit preachers that nobody wanted. And because nobody wanted them, they had nothing to lose. And they did what nobody else would do. They were willing to go out to the people, to throw away religion, and to keep Jesus. And you've got the Wesley brothers, you've got the Log College students, you got Jonathan Edwards, you got George Whitefield, you got this whole band of people that are willing to forsake everything to give people Jesus. And as a result, they went to the people, they removed religion, and they gave them the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is the foundation of the Great Awakening. This is what enabled it to take place. You had all these things coming together. People knew that they didn't know what they should. You had preachers who had nothing to lose, and they were willing to go out and give people the gospel and throw away religion. And that will always produce a revival or an awakening among the people. And as long as you are stuck on religion, you will always suffer dreadfully under religion of the dullness, because it cannot give you what Jesus Christ can give you. That's the Great Awakening, the first Great Awakening. There are 4 of these. We're looking at one. We're going to walk through the other 3 the next 3 weeks. The 4th one is my favorite one. It is absolutely wild, and some of you were a part of it, which is pretty cool. But I won't spoil it for you. That's all I got for you. The end.